All quad courses have constraints that caused havoc for the average pilot. Let's take a look at some good ways and some better ways to use gates in quad racing.
GoDroneX.
Hello FPV racers, I'm Greg from GoDroneX. Let's take a look at how we can use gates in the most optimal way. Some of the things about gates. We don't have a lot of them and they take a lot of time to set up. So we want to use them in the best possible way to serve two masters, the beginner level and the advanced level. So let's take a look at how we can do that. Gates can be classified into four main areas: straights, turns, carousels, and the double use of a gate. Let's take a look at the first gate, a straight pass-through gate. Here we have a dotted line representing the beginner racing line, and pro would be the solid line. Pretty straightforward for both of them. It doesn't offer any risk reward for either of them. They just go faster to maintain the line, cue it up, and hit the throttle. So generally, I consider these a fail. There's usually a better way to accomplish this, because we could use this gate perhaps somewhere as a turn. A better way to do the straight is perhaps having that gate turned 90 degrees so the more pro pilot can switch through this at a more slicing of an angle, and then the beginner pilot will have to square it up more, come at a side, and go through. That would be the win version of this, and it creates risk reward for the pilot. Here's a better picture showing what I mean. The advanced pilot can take this at a tougher slice, and the rookie pilot can come around, line it up, cut through, and resume the normal course, of course taking a slower line. Here's an example of what we did earlier in the year. You came out of this 3D structure and made a 90-degree turn. Your goal is to end up over here at the beginning of a 5-turn slalom. So the direct line would be from here to about here. So an advanced racer is going to come out, take this as straight as they can, and slice through the gate. A more beginner turn would be coming out more where these yellow dots are representing and then come through. Worked really well. Now let's take a look at how we can use gates in a turn. Typically, a lot of people set up gates at the end of the turn. People will come in barreling straight away as they get through the turn. Depending on where they've got to go, they'll either drift turn this or they'll bank turn it. Well, under the current scenario, most people will come flying through and then they'll start to throw on the brakes, hairpin it, and come around. The more advanced pilot will take a shorter line. The dotted line, which is more of a beginner line, will have a larger overshoot. Doesn't offer a lot of risk-reward alternatives. A better way to do it would be what's called the backdooring it. Do the same type of turn, come around from behind, and then come through. Now, your advanced pilot is still going to want to shoot through this, right? But now they've got to make a proactionary decision rather than a reactionary decision. In other words, much like auto racing, they've got to decide where they're going to put the brakes on before they make this turn. And then the third option is, why don't we just turn this at a 90-degree turn so everybody can come through at an angle? Now a beginner is going to take this dotted line, they're going to come out, square it up a little bit more, round it off, and then come back out again. More of a U-shape, a bottom U-shape. A more advanced pilot now has a couple of options depending on where he needs to end up. He can drift slide this, right? Or he could round it out and take a hard bank. So once again, this offers both racers a different challenge for the same type of turn based on risk reward. Let's look at a couple of examples of that. Here we have the classic example at the end of the straightaway going into the turn. We round off and make a right through an angled 90-degree gate. What we also did on this course is because we had a bank of trees here, we forced people through. Now what I found is most racers are going to take the easiest way through. They're not going to think about the racing line and they're going to live to fight another day once they get through it. So I had guys shooting through this as fast as they could, then trying to get back on course. What I did to make their life a little bit more challenging is I put a flag right here. So eventually they adapted and they had to start rolling through this turn in a bank in order to make this turn. Before they would come through, go overshoot, slam on the brakes, and have to cut back and get around. Now there's dotted lines representing they would come out, they'd start the roll, and they would be pulling 80-degree banks through here and have just enough room to cut it through. That worked much better. Here's another example where I could have put a gate turn here at the end of the start finish. People would come racing through here and do this switchback or a back door. A lot of times I choose not to put a gate there because remember, everybody crashes in gates, or at least that's the highest area where people will crash. And I don't want people to crash, especially in this situation. So I found that the end of the straightaway is not necessarily the best place to put a turn. It can be, but I want people battling for position here, especially at the start. The lack of a gate and instead using two flags accomplishes the same objective. I get people battling for position, slamming on their brakes at the same time, they're not crashing out. Another fantastic use of multiple gates is what I call a carousel. Let's go take a look at how it's used in road racing. Here's an example of Road America found in around the middle of Wisconsin. You come through turn 8, turn 9 starts the carousel. You're pulling high G's and your car wants to slip off. The way you handle this is you have very consistent road pressure and you barely move the car. Once you lock your turn radius in, you just hold it and you can maximize your grip. That's a carousel. Another example, for those that know Mid-Ohio, this is in middle of Ohio. Same thing, this is called the keyhole. Here you would come around, sometimes they use the chicane, sometimes they don't. And this is a smaller radius, but the same thing. You're holding a pretty good speed as you come through this constant radius turn. In the middle of summer, Horizon Hobby invited us down to Champaign to run a race. And this is how we implemented a double gate carousel for them. We actually had the course of 3 gates in here. We came out of the turn and we went through it like that. Now, I thought this would be difficult for the average person. I found it very challenging. I talked to people who were pretty good racers, but they weren't super fast, and some of them had no problem at all. And this goes back to if you fly within your own ability and you're good at gates to begin with, it's not that much of a problem to implement in your course. Here's another example from MultiGP. This is the UTT Universal Time Trial track, and you can see the 5-1 complex here is another example of a 90-degree carousel. Most guys love this. They find it challenging. The high-speed guys are going to be pulling 90-degree banks through this entire thing, and then the average person is going to check up a little bit on their speed and be rolling through it at 45 degrees, and the beginners are going to take it straight, turn over here, square off, and then take it the final straightaway. Here's an example of a carousel in nature. This is a 180-degree carousel. These are hard to find. These are 2 evergreens placed here that's been pruned, so it creates a hole shot. You can come through this, turn 180 degrees, and then there's another set of 2 evergreens that's been pruned, and the hole shot coming back, followed by a very tricky, constrained hairpin through here.
GoDroneX!
See race results at GoDroneX.com and join the conversation on Facebook at GoDroneX and FPV Tree Racers.